And we've begun. Okay, so in terms of farewell to Manzanar, one of the things that I asked you to do last time for me was journal, do like a little journal entry. And what kinds of things did you write about? What did you write about? Is anybody willing to share? And you guys want one of your Chromebooks so you can access it. Take a look. You got that. And our prompts were, let me open that up, I guess. Oh, everything's too big, too big. So we had examples of changes in Jean's relationship with her parents. To what extent are those changes a result of internment? To what extent do they reflect the fact that Jean is growing up? To what extent are they prompted by changes in her parents? How do you personally relate to her experiences? So what kinds of things did you come up with, those of you who wrote about number one? What does it make you think of? Are there moments in the text that you might point to where, it's pretty evident that that's happening? Okay.
I brought up when her dad started beating the mom.
Right. So that abuse, witnessing your parent abuse the other parent, is certainly going to create a divide. Other thoughts on that? On that number one. How many other people did write about number one? Yep. What did you write about?
So I found this quote on this quote. It says, rather it was the first grateful of her separateness. This was showing that first it was her father that she did have a problem with both her parents, but over the years, after her father was captured and was, I would say, mentally broken, she kind of lost the bond between them. Then her mother, it happened the same way.
Right.
That's what it means for separateness.
Okay. If we take a look at page, say, it's within this chapter 13 that it really shows up. So page 93. It's been established certainly prior to this point, and that judgment of her father, that negative judgment of her father. So the very first paragraph, once we settled into block 28, so they had moved to that kind of near the pear orchard. That ache I felt since soon after we arrived at Manzanar subsided. It didn't entirely disappear, but it gradually submerged as semblances of order returned and our pattern of life assumed its new design. So that's the beginning of something new that's kind of happening. And so she, the title of the chapter is Outings and Explorations. And so, she gets outside of the camp and explores some different things. She explores the church, certainly. She had that kind of introduction to ballet and quickly discovered that, oh no, that is absolutely not for me. But then on page 104, maybe 103, let's go with 103. She wants to be baptized in Catholic. She wants to become a Catholic. And ultimately, what did you notice about the reason why she wanted to become a Catholic? Why did she want to become a Catholic?
Because the people around her were.
People around her were, but there's something else too. And think about the mindset of, a young girl, 12, 13 years old. Why would she want to be Catholic? It's cute and dear. Anybody remember? I didn't remember. Trying to. Okay.
Is it because she wants to marry a Catholic boy?
No, but you're close. You're looking at, right around the right page. Yes, so Zane's got it. She wants to look beautiful like the girl who was confirmed. So if you look at page 102, yeah, and think about where you were, both my young men and young women, in middle school, maybe at the end of elementary school, and our desire to be accepted, to be popular, to look a certain way, and all that sort of thing. And so she writes the first full paragraph on 102. I'd long observed her from a distance, this orphan, a slim and lovely girl, and always aloof because of the way other kids treated orphans there, as if a lack of parents put you somehow beneath everyone else. I confess I felt that way myself. Orphans were in a class apart. In Block 28, we saw an off children's village where Sister Suzanne and Sister Bernadette put in a good deal of time. It was as near to us as their chapel, 2 blocks away in the opposite direction. Each day, about a dozen of them, including this girl, would come tripping past our barracks on the way to a catechism lesson. On days I intended to go, I would wait till they were half a block ahead so I wouldn't be seen arriving in their midst. I didn't want to be associated with them. And so this idea of other, it's a very curious sort of thing. So even though Jean herself is a member of a marginalized community, she still doesn't want to be part of that even further marginalized community. So you want to be thinking about that, what was the universe of obligation. Those people, those orphans, are outside of her universe of obligation. She doesn't want to be part of that. And we do these little things all the time. How can we go about stopping doing that? The girl had already been baptized. What I witnessed was her confirmation. She was dressed like a bride. And so that's certainly, where that idea comes in. White gown, white lace hood, and sheer veil, walking toward the altar down the aisle of that converted barracks. Watching her from the pew, I was pierced with envy for the position she had gained. At the same time, I was filled with awe and with a startled wonder at the notion that this girl, this orphan, could become such a queen. A few days later, I let it be known that I was going to be baptized into the church and confirmed as soon as the nuns thought I was ready. And so this kind of announcement to a family that is not Catholic is going to make their parents a little concerned. Right? I announced this to the sisters, and they rejoiced. I announced it at home, and Papa exploded. No, he roared, absolutely not. I just stood there, stunned, too scared to speak. You're too young. I started to cry. How are you going to get married? He shouted. If you get baptized a Catholic, you have to marry a Catholic. No Japanese boys are in the Catholic Church. You get baptized now, how are you going to find a good Japanese boy to marry? And so there's this concern about, what's going to happen to her. She can't marry anyone that's not Japanese because of laws that exist. And of course, there's this other law within the church, this Catholic law that existed at the time. It's not so much anymore, but my parents had to get a special dispensation from their bishop in order to be able to get married because my dad was not Catholic. So then at the bottom of, 103, He rose to his full, oh, so she's 10. I'm forgetting exactly like where her age is. But at this point, she's like 12-ish. He rose to his full height as if she, about the size of Mama, were the general of some invading army. So he's arguing with Sister Bernadette. Said, too young. Old enough to know God. Who knows anything of God at 10? This made her angry. At any other time, they would have taken an hour hearing each other out. But now, when she opened her mouth to reply, his upheld flat palm stopped her. He's not going to even hear it. He was not going to argue. He wouldn't even let her pass the door. And so the question that we're answering here is give examples of changes in Jean's relationship with her parents. This is telling. In exasperation, she glared at him, then turned and walked away. I ran to my bunk, devastated and wept, hating him. Hating him. I was too ashamed to go back to catechism after that. I just hated Papa for weeks and dreamed of the white-gowned princess I might have become. And so it's her father, she envisions that it's her father who is prohibiting her from being able to look like that other little girl described on page 102. Late afternoons, practicing my baton in the fire break. Angrily, I would throw him into the air and watch him twirl and catch him and throw him high again and again and again. Now, what's going on with that last sentence of the chapter?
She's imagining the baton is her dad, just like throwing it around.
Exactly. She's imagining that the baton is her father and she's throwing him around. And so that the way that it's described, angrily, I would throw him into the air and watch him twirl and catch him and throw him high again and again and again. So she's equating the baton with her father. She's imagining that that's what's happening. But there's something else that's going on there too. That we have any insight into what else might be happening in that moment, in that tossing of the baton. What is it that you need if you're tossing a baton? Does anybody have baton experience? Anybody at home have any baton experience? I mean, it's a challenge for sure. I don't, but how about who's on the dance team? Is anybody on the dance team?
I was.
Were you? Anybody at home on the dance team? What does that require of you? What does it demand of you? Skill, certainly. Something else. There's another word that's associated with skill that I'm trying to find here. Practice. Practice and skill enable you to have what? Over the baton. Let me put it that way. But fill in the blank. They allow you to have what over the baton? Control. Perfect. Control. Think about that. You know, the position that you are in right now, you're not in control. And that is what we need more than anything else in our lives, is we need to have control over our own lives. At the same time, she's 10 years old. And how much control should a 10-year-old have over her own life? She should have some freedom for sure. But how much freedom does this little girl have? What is her greatest restriction? Where is she? She's in a prison camp. So she doesn't have like freedom of movement. And now her father is not letting her do whatever it is that she wants to do. But ultimately, hopefully, you recognize that your parents don't let you do whatever it is that you want to do. Why? Why do your parents not let you do whatever it is that you want to do? What are they trying to do under those circumstances? In their attempts to have certain prohibitions, what are they trying to do? Anybody have any idea? Don't forget, I'm both a parent and a teacher. What is it that I'm trying to do? Yeah. What's that? Protect. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's concern that, what is the reason that she wants to be baptized? Because she wants to be like somebody else. It's not because she knows God. She wants to wear the pretty dress and be the focus of attention. That's what she wants. She doesn't care about the faith necessarily. She just wants to look like that other little girl and have that attention. And so the very next chapter then really highlights kind of what's happening. And page 106, I think, is what nails this split, this moment that number one is asking. And it's 4 lines from the top of the page. Then one afternoon there came a moment when I was cut off from both of them, Papa and Mama together. It wasn't loneliness I felt or isolation. They were still within reach. Rather, it was that first brief flicker of total separateness. That they are other beings and I am another being. I'm not one of them necessarily. It could have occurred anywhere we might have been living. I had reached the age. What does that mean? What does that mean? Have any thoughts on that? What does that mean? I think it nails the second question within number one. It's a simple answer.
She realizes that her parents are different, believed, and she can't always try to impress them and be like them.
Yeah, I'm not like them. They are not like me. We're different worlds. And ultimately, I mean, the answer to number 2, to what extent do they reflect the fact that Gene is growing up? I had reached the age. I'm gonna be in conflict with my parents. I've got a 14-year-old at home right now who's, man. And my wife and I, we still talk about the fact that we absolutely, we want to eat her up. We love her. But we're butting heads like almost constantly. But at the same time, we can still see elements of, a little girl who needs us and who needs our guidance as much as possible. And so there's that desire to protect and try to keep her from any kind of harm. So number 2, internment was temporary. Gene and other Japanese Americans knew that they would someday be released. Gene describes the experience as being suspended in some odd, almost lovely land you could not escape from, yet almost didn't want to leave. What does she mean by that statement? How do you personally relate to this idea? How might it connect with our pandemic world? And I did look at a couple of number 2s, you were being honest in saying, man, it sounds weird, but there's a part of me that almost doesn't want this to end. How many of you, does that sound weird to you? Or do you get that a little bit? It'd be nice if everybody could come back. That would be awesome. It's going to be a while, but there's going to be some anxiety when that happens. And so what are the anxieties that we want to be dealing with? We're starting to get used to this, and that's a big part of what number 2 is all about. So that suspension, feeling suspended in some odd, almost lovely land that you almost don't want to leave, it's because we get used to it. We get used to certain things. When I was a little boy, how old was I? I think I must have been 9. I think I was 8 or 9 years old. My family took a 2-week vacation to Florida. And we came back, we arrived home the day before my dad had to go back to work. He had not planned out for, kind of a day of rest from the vacation, ironically. When he got home, the moment he got home, he wanted to quit his job. He just wanted to quit his job. He didn't want to go back. He was just crushed. And he said, never again did I ever plan a vacation like that. I always made sure that I had at least like one day of not having to travel and be able to kind of reacclimate myself to my space. My daughter, after a month home from winter break, from college, the Monday before we had to take her back, I made her burst into tears because her little sister said, Abby doesn't want to go back to school. Because the whole time that she was home, she was just in this kind of state of suspension, the state of suspended animation, where, she didn't have any responsibilities. There was not any work that she had to be doing, and she was just allowed to just kind of be. And she had access to her family at any time that she wanted. Some of her friends were home. She did not want to go back. And my wife and I were terrified for her. Is she going to be okay? Is she putting off these other things that we keep asking her to do for the school because she's trying to self-sabotage herself? And we do those kinds of things too. We self-sabotage a lot of the time because we're happy with our current situation. And so we don't want to move beyond that current situation. So I shared with you my writing. Go ahead and take a look at that at your leisure. I'm not going to have you look at it right now because there are some other things that I do want us to look at. Number 3, why are Jean's parents and many others in the camp reluctant to leave? How realistic are their fears of the outside world, and to what extent are those fears an outcome of their years at Manzanar? And how do we respond to that? How can we begin to respond to that? How many people, did any of you guys in the room respond to number 3? Anybody at home respond to number 3? Yeah, Parker. What did you talk about? You remember? Are you willing to share with us?
I think it was basically just the fears that they had, the uncertainty of the real world, and not just Manzanar.
Yeah. So what else? What's out there, right? And it's there's a legitimate concern. What's going to happen when we're no longer protected here in this space? What's going to happen to us? And I want to show you, and what you're going to look at is offensive. But these are some political cartoons of the era that show how racist our society was towards people of Japanese descent. Not that you need an education necessarily on how racist America can be, but America was not the only racist place in terms of. It was not the only racist place. The Japanese were also racist against Americans. But here's an example right here. So let me see if I can get this shown to you. And that's upside down, isn't it? Is that upside down? Or is it right side up? Is that upside down or right side up? Zane, can you help me out? Upside down? Okay. So that's the trick. That's what I need. There it is. There we go. Okay. So this is somebody from the U.S., somebody from Great Britain, somebody from the Soviet Union, and there's our racist term, Jap, portrayed as what? And I'll show you guys in a minute. Yeah, so there is a dehumanization that's going on there that happens frequently, and that's what enables us to kill other human beings easily. But all of them. So again, representation doesn't eat. So it's when we dehumanize when we make other human beings non-human. That's what enables us to be able to kill other people. And that there's a long history of that behavior. And it's not just representations of Asians. We do it to Black Americans. We've done it to, I think, even like Italians and Eastern Europeans. So that representation and the conveyance of the other as literally non-human is, what enables us to put people in camps, in internment camps. Or, in the case of Nazi Germany, to put them in concentration camps and just summarily execute them. So there's concern, and they're seeing those political cartoons. Those cartoons appear in newspapers. And so they're going to see those representations. And then number 4, so this fourth question is about Woody visiting his father's favorite aunt. And how many people wrote about number 4? Anybody read about number 4? What did you make of that chapter? It certainly is a unique one. And it took me a while to kind of get my grip on what was happening in that chapter at first. I was really thrown in that moment where am I at? That's what it is. Where his aunt says, so page 129, no, 128, the second to last paragraph, where his aunt says, your father was buried here in 1913. Woody looks at her, wondering how old she really is, wondering how well she remembers. Is she a senile old lady? She lost her mind? What's going on here? She's Papa's aunt. She might be 80. He studies her face for some measure of how far her recollection can be trusted. How is she forgotten? And then she explains, first he says, but I told you, page 129, first full paragraph, he lives in California now, today, alive, with 10 children, of which I am the second oldest. To which she responds, in 1913, he had been gone for 9 years with no word. To the family in Japan, he was dead. This is his gravestone. I show it to you so you will know how much he mattered to us here. So you will know how happy you have made me bringing this news that he still lives. The happiness I feel now erases all this war has put us through. So there was no indication, they had no idea that he was still alive. That was how separated he had become from his family. And that's certainly a painful sort of element. So what kinds of things are you marking? What kinds of things do you have questions about? We've got about a half an hour left, and I want to look at certainly those pages that I asked you to kind of see if you could guess what it was that I wanted to draw our attention to. But what do What kinds of things are you marking? What are you noticing? What do you want to point out? Is there anything? What are you liking? Got it? Yeah, okay.
I like how it's all just like descriptive. Like there's parts like obviously it's telling a story, but like the description is just really good.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Just in general.
Descriptions are good. What else? What else do you like? Is there anything you don't like? Anything you're having a hard time? Let's look at some of those pages. So page 88, if you would. So they're kind of looking at the mountain, Mount Whitney. Very top of the page. Whitney reminded Papa, so four lines from the top of the page. Whitney reminded Papa of Fujiyama. That is, it gave him the same kind of spiritual sustenance. The tremendous beauty of those peaks of the Rocky Mountains was inspirational, as so many natural forms are to the Japanese. The rocks outside our doorway could be those mountains in miniature. And this is what I marked. They also represented those forces in nature, those powerful and inevitable forces that cannot be resisted, reminding a man that sometimes he must simply endure that which cannot be changed. What do we make of that sentence? Why would I have marked that particular sentence? They also represented the mountains, represented those forces in nature, those powerful and inevitable forces that cannot be resisted, reminding a man that sometimes he must simply endure that which cannot be changed. Why is that important for us? Why is it important for them? Ideas? About how it relates to what appears on page 89. Near the bottom, these two sentences might speak to each other. And it's the last full sentence on page 89. In such a narrow world, in order to survive, you learn to contain your rage and your despair, and you try to recreate, as well as you can, your normality, some sense of things continuing. How might those two sentences go together? How do they work together? Now, those of you working with your own book, you might mark those two sentences.
Maybe it's just like saying that both of them are saying that you can't change what you've done in the past and you have to focus on the future.
Sure. Is there anything about the past though that they're worried about? What is it that the author is speaking about in terms of what we can't change? And you might think about how it applies to us right now. Who is absolutely delighted with their current circumstances? Who's just giddy with excitement about our current set of circumstances? No! I've said it before and I will say it again. This sucks. This sucks. It's awful. But for now, it's what we've got. And so what do we have to do under those circumstances? This speaks to our humanity. This speaks to us right now in our moment in time. This sucks. Jean's circumstances are terrible. She's in prison. And she's reminded daily by looking at the mountains that, yeah, this sucks. But in order to get through to the other side, whatever that other side looks like, what does she have to do? Just keep going. We can look at it as the Dory philosophy, right? Just keep swimming. We don't have a choice. We've got to keep going. And so we keep going. And we fight through it. And 89, so she talks about the endurance. You've got to have the endurance. Sometimes you just simply have to endure that which you cannot change. We can't change this. There's nothing that we can do. It's happening beyond our control. But what we can do, in order to survive, we can contain our rage and our despair and try to recreate as well as we can a new normal. Some sense of things continuing. That's what we've got to do. It looks like Mr. Starkweather is getting ready to work on Outliers, right? You read Outliers last year? Okay. Talking about intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. To get through this extrinsic force that's playing on us, what do we need to get through? What's that? Oh, okay. Busy. Good luck. Have fun. Come on, you'll have fun, right? Yeah? Are you like hands-on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you not hands-on?
No, we have the subs right now, so we feel like just had a
Oh,
we've had a sub all year.
All right. all right. What do you like? So what do we need? We've got these extrinsic forces pushing on us. What do we need to get through? Intrinsic motivation. We've got to find whatever it is inside of us so that we can fight through this. And ultimately we've got to contain the rage. Maybe we're not enraged, but our despair, and try to recreate as well as we can our normality. Okay? Page 96. Take a look at 96. So this is kind of a weird moment. The first sentence of the last paragraph. If I had been told the next morning, so this is when she was out camping with Esau and Lois. If I had been told the next morning that I could stay outside the fence as long as I wanted, that I was free to go, it would have sent me sprinting for the compound. And this is something else that I think many of you can relate to. This idea of, for those of you who are working at home, and the idea of being able to come back here, who would have thought that you would have missed being contained in a classroom? Who would have thought that you would have missed being at Penn High School? And so this idea, if I had been told the next morning that I could stay outside the fence as long as I wanted, that I was free to go, it would have sent me sprinting for the compound. We can begin to connect with this idea. Zane, are you thinking something? You look like you're thinking something. No, okay. Page 103. Oh, we looked at that. 104. What do we have on 104? Oh, we talked about that. Good. 106. There it is. 106, 107. What's going on at the very bottom of 106, top of 107? When she went into the hospital, she's talking about, her sister-in-law, is that right? A few months later, she was drafted, Eleanor pregnant, to find out her work no money. Older sister, no, it's her sister. When she went into the hospital, it was a time of great anxiety in our family. Two of my sisters had born children there. They had both hemorrhaged badly, and blood plasma was in short supply, our needs being low on the wartime priority list. One sister might have died had not Woody provided blood by direct transfusion. In the case of a sister-in-law of ours who had miscarried and hemorrhaged, no one was able to arrest it in time, and she just bled to death in her hospital bed. What's going on there? That's a powerful sort of moment, and it speaks to us right now in terms of COVID. You have any idea how that connects to our moment right now? How that speaks to our moment in time?
Short supply of medications.
There's a short supply of supplies, of our smaller communities who don't have large hospitals, PPE, vaccines, so on and so forth, and frequently in minority communities. Frequently in minority communities. And so, they're not high on the priority list. They don't have blood that's necessary to sustain life. And so people are dying. Page 108. Another moment that stood out to me. Let's see here. So they're talking about the baby. The baby came. It's a boy. And so that first full big paragraph on 108, she began to talk excitedly, jabbering the details. As the news sunk in, and so this is the sentence that I underlined, as the news sunk in, my fear was replaced by an odd detachment. So we've got this detachment that's happening. The burden fell away, leaving me afloat, and I was a spectator witnessing the nearest to a love scene I would ever see between them, between my parents. My own perception removed me from it. I was more awed than aware. But I knew whatever I was watching was somehow both tender and profound, with an intimacy that made me invisible to them. So she's become detached from her parents because of their excitement about the grandchild. And she is coming into her own. And there are these moments in our lives that I think many of us can similar moments in our lives that I think we can all kind of relate to. Page 114, it is important to note, and this is striking, that middle paragraph on 114, the final case, so we looked at those Supreme Court cases a couple of weeks ago, challenged the internment itself. Soon after she was evacuated in April 1942, Mitsue Endo, a 21-year-old Nisei and an employee of the California State Highway Commission, filed a petition for habeas corpus, produced the body. protesting her detention at Topaz Camp in central Utah. She spent 2.5 years awaiting the high court's decision. So it's got to go through the court system, which was that she had been right. The government cannot detain loyal citizens against their will. But the decision comes right around the time that the war's ending. And so, what good does that do anybody? But at least now we know that you can't do that. It's important information. Page 115, this is something that's going to be important for us. This speaks to systemic racism. And that's an idea that we're going to be coming back to again and again and again. Systemic racism. Racism within the system, right? Something that President Biden signed a couple of executive orders yesterday about trying to eliminate systemic racism. Page 115 near the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the top. 3 years of wartime propaganda. Racist headlines, atrocity movies, hate slogans, and fright mask posters had turned the Japanese face into something despicable and grotesque. Mama and Papa knew this. They had been reading the papers. Even I knew this, although it was not until many years later that I realized how bad things actually were. So she's, sheltered in some way. But 3 consistent years of propaganda, like that poster that I showed you, like those political cartoons. Page 118. So we've got these 3 years, and then this first full paragraph, kind of right around the middle of that first full paragraph that starts with those images, we're looking at call it the foretaste. Call it the foretaste of being hated. I knew ahead of time that if someone looked at me with hate, I would have to allow it, to swallow it, because something in me, something about me, deserved it. At 10, I saw that coming, like a judge's sentence, and I would have stayed inside the camp forever rather than step outside and face such a moment. How does that sentence capture what systemic racism does to an individual? How does it capture what bullying might do to an individual? I mean, those are 2 vastly different worlds. But some of us can't speak to being victims of systemic racism. So how can we begin to understand the impact of systemic racism? What does it do to us? What does that even mean? I mean, look at that sentencing, or that chunk of text. I would have to swallow it. I would have to allow it to swallow it because something in me, something about me deserved it. That's what's devastating. Deserved it? Why would she think that? Yeah?
Because it was rebellion that track law.
No.
No, that's not it.
She doesn't, because she doesn't deserve it at all. no matter who she is. Why would she believe that she deserves it?
That's what she's been told by everyone.
That's exactly right. It's what she's been told by everyone else. When you're told something over and over and over again, you start to believe it. When you're held down under the thumb of oppressors, you start to believe that you must have deserved it. This goes back to something that Arthur Miller said, and I don't know if you guys remember that or not. Erase that. Hopefully Mr. Starkweather won't be mad at me. There's something that Arthur Miller talks about, and I can't remember which piece it was in. I want to say it was in Why I Wrote the Crucible. And he said that neighbors of Jews in Nazi Germany during World War II, neighbors of Jews in Europe, would see their neighbors disappear, and they thought to themselves, well, they must have done something. Well, they must have done something. They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything. And that's one of the concerns right now in the discussions that we're having regarding the police, the conflict between the police and Black Lives Matter. Frequently, white people will say, well, they must have done something. But that's what they say, right? Even though they didn't. A little boy carrying a toy gun, shot to death by police. Somebody walking home with a pack of gum, shot to death by somebody who's standing his ground. Somebody who's looking at construction houses, out for a run, shot by 2 vigilantes. Somebody who's out bird watching in Central Park as the police called on him. They must have done something, but that is not the case. That is a lie. That idea that, and somebody starts to believe when we start to spread that idea, that's so wrong. They must have done something. Something about me deserved it. And that's not true at all. Okay? Who deserves that kind of treatment? Who deserves to be hated? Nobody does. Nobody deserves it. I want to look at one more, although we're out of time. 2 minutes left. Remind me that I want to pick up with page 119. Do that. All right, folks at home, keep reading. If you're behind, catch up. Don't count on always being able to have the SSR time, okay? In fact, next week, Tuesday and Thursday, we will not meet at all. So it's going to be lots of bringing yourself back up to speed, and kind of reviewing a lot of different things. I got to try to figure out how I can help you review this while you're doing I-STEP without putting too much pressure on you. All right. Okay. Don't forget, next week, Tuesday and Thursday, bring your Chromebook charged. Bring it charged. Be ready. Okay? Okay. And get here, early under the circumstances that you can, so that you can, make sure that you can log into the Wi-Fi and that you're all set up. I think one of the things that we're gonna have to do on Friday is make sure that your browsers or that your Chromebooks are up to date. It's a big thing I might have to do. All right? Okay. Close it all. I'll see you. Take care. See you Friday. Friday.